In my mother's house, there seemed to be a presence of otherworldly beings, and among them was a particular man. As a child, I hardly noticed him, but as I grew older, I started seeing him more frequently. These sightings were always fleeting. It felt as if he was constantly observing me, whether I was doing household chores or simply sitting in my room with the door ajar. I remember distinctly feeling his presence grow stronger when I was vacuuming. It was so intense that I often had to stop, just to make sure I could hear my surroundings again. Strangely, I was never truly afraid of him. It was more about the oddity of the situation. Encountering ghosts isn't exactly my cup of tea. Every time I felt he was nearby, it was just brief glimpses of him. It was almost like he was a figment of my imagination, as I could never get a clear view of him. In the evening, things at my mother's house took a strange turn. During the day, it was mostly silent, with only the occasional sound of someone walking. But there was an odd, unsettling atmosphere that I can't quite put into words. But at night, the house seemed to transform. It became noisier, yet the feeling of airiness intensified. I often heard footsteps that grew louder, especially a distinct sound that reminded me of someone walking in high heels. These steps would quicken, heading towards my bedroom before suddenly vanishing. There were nights when I heard a loud thud against my door. In addition to these sounds, there was an occasional, very loud banging noise. It was as if someone was hitting the ground forcefully. Sometimes, late at night, I heard a strange, muffled noise that sounded like several voices speaking at once. It wasn't a frequent occurrence, but when it happened, it was deeply unsettling. Our home was not a happy place. There was a history of violence and sadness. My mother struggled with alcoholism and her own personal demons. She could be abusive, and I, too, experienced my share of hardship, though I prefer not to delve into those details at the moment. Shifting focus to the mysterious presence in my room, before my boyfriend moved in, I noticed something unusual at night. In the middle of my bedroom, there appeared to be a large, dark shape. It was so intensely black that it stood out even in the darkness of the room. I tried to convince myself it was just a shadow, but its depth and darkness felt too unnatural. I could even hear what seemed like breathing coming from this dark mass. It was large, nearly touching the ceiling. At first, I didn't connect it with the man my father had mentioned, but over time, I began to wonder. It wasn't until I was around 17 years old that my father revealed a tragic past event. A man had taken his own life in our house, hanging himself before we moved in. This revelation made me reflect on my own past. When I was 15, I had faced a very dark time and had attempted to end my life in that same room. I sometimes think that this personal experience might have created a stronger connection between me and this ghostly presence. After that incident, I found myself more attuned to spiritual occurrences, almost as if my near-death experience had heightened my sensitivity to these entities. The idea that my own struggle and the history of the house were somehow intertwined began to take hold in my mind. This connection, whether real or imagined, added another layer of complexity to the already mysterious and unsettling atmosphere of our home. As time passed, the presence of the tall, lean figure with short hair in my house became more frequent, and oddly, it started to feel normal. I even began to sense that this entity was shielding me from the other, more unsettling ghost I had mentioned earlier. In a home where feelings of depression and loneliness were common for me, this figure seemed like a strange form of companionship, even though I never saw him clearly. Then an unusual incident occurred when I was 18. One evening, while watching TV in my room with my boyfriend, I had to go to the bathroom. Usually, I would ask my boyfriend to accompany me to the door because the darkness of the house at night, coupled with the eerie occurrences, made me very fearful. But that night, for some reason, I didn't ask him to come along. After finishing in the bathroom, I checked my phone. It was 1:25 a.m. As I switched off the light and prepared to hurry back to my room, a chilling moment stopped me in my tracks. A man's voice, barely above a whisper, said, "I'm sorry," right behind me. I could feel his breath and presence, as if he was standing over me. My voice trembling, I called out River, my boyfriend's name. But deep down, I knew it wasn't him. Pacing back to my room, heart pounding, I was overwhelmed with fear. It was one thing to sense a ghostly presence. It was entirely another to hear a whisper so close, so real. I burst into my room, eyes wide with shock, and leapt into my boyfriend's arms. As he comforted me, I noticed the shadow of my dream catcher on the ceiling looked odd, as if it had turned around. That night, sleep was impossible, and we stayed up, watching TV, trying to calm my nerves. The following night, I reflected on my reaction, and strangely, I felt a twinge of guilt. Having faced my own dark moments of despair, I empathized with the spirit who whispered, "I'm sorry." At exactly 1:25 a.m., I gathered my courage and ventured into the dark hallway. I whispered into the void, "I forgive you," before hurrying back to the safety of my room. I couldn't be sure why the spirit had apologized, but I guessed it might have been directed to someone who cared for him in life. A year after these unsettling events, I decided to move out with my boyfriend. On the day of the move, my brother and his fiancée, Carrie, were there to help us. I stepped outside to the front yard as we were wrapping up, and there I saw my brother chatting with Carrie. Suddenly, Carrie's expression changed. Her eyes widened, and she pointed towards my bedroom window, visibly shaken. She stammered, "Someone's watching us from your window." At first, I thought she might be referring to my uncle or dad, who were also around helping with the move. But Carrie quickly dismissed that idea, struggling to express herself in English, which wasn't her first language. She managed to convey, "No, a different man. He was like a shadow, hard to see clearly." Hearing this, a cold feeling settled in my stomach. That incident marked the last encounter anyone had with the mysterious figure in my mother's house. Since then, I've had no desire to return there. The memory of Carrie's startled expression and the description of the shadowy man at the window stayed with me, reinforcing my decision to leave that house and its eerie presences behind.